Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining, and special thanks to our host, Barnes & Noble. I'm Denise Roy, editor to my favorite author, James Patterson, and we're here tonight to
He
talk
says that about all our writers.
We're here tonight to talk about his #1 New York Times bestselling memoir, James Patterson by James Patterson. So you've been on a 2-week book tour.
Why didn't you talk me out of that title? We could have called it something interesting.
Well, it's memorable. That's what makes it work. Great stuff. Anyway, so you've been meeting fans all over the country, including a 96-year-old mega fan who brought along several Alex Cross books. So when you saw the first in the series, Along Came a Spider, on the New York Times bestseller list, you didn't believe it.
No, I had to go out and check. I actually went to a Barnes and Noble which is no longer there in New York City. And what we writers will do sometimes is we'll count the books. And I had counted the books and I knew there were 12. And then when I went in, there were only 6. So I'm thinking, well, maybe the New York Times is because I'd seen on the list that it was number 6, but I didn't quite believe it. And then the other thing we'll do is if we're in the store and somebody picks up the book, we watch you. Or this can happen in airports, whatever. So if you pick up the book and you look around and make sure there's no author watching you. And if you put the book down, it breaks our hearts. And we have, but if you buy the book or you take it with you, it makes our day. So I'm watching this woman, she's picked up Along Came a Spider. And I'm like, this is interesting. And then she puts it under her arm and she walks down the aisle and she puts it into her handbag and she stole it. And all I can think is, does that count as a sale? And Little Brown says it does, and Barnes and Noble says it doesn't. So but that was my beginning of my time on the bestseller list.
Right, and then you went on tour for that book. So what happened there?
On tour for Along Came a Spider? So long ago, Denise, I don't remember. But this current tour with James Patterson, it was delightful. And we had some really, really nice crowds, and people were the sweetest. And they brought old books and new books, and a lot of people had already read it. I mean, one of the I won't get into where, but somewhere where they have the numbers, and it's like a 4.8 out of 5 in terms of 5-star things, which is I've never had a book that high. So that's really cool. You worry about something like this. Is anybody going to like the damn thing? And but people are there. Like right before I went on tour, one of my best friends from high school called, and he had just read it, and he started crying on the phone, which is just the sweetest thing. And one of my sisters, I just talked to her today, and she just finished it, and she just said it just reminded her of how close we were. And so it's a lot of nice things have happened. Very, very human and sweet and fabulous.
Oh, that's wonderful. And speaking of generational ties, I saw recently a post from one of your fans that had a really special request, which was "Don't kill Nana Mama." Alex Cross's grandmother.
I have heard that one before. One of the tricks with Cross, and I learned this from John D. McDonald, who used to do the Travis McGee.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
And his advice was like he would do one year, and then the next year he'd have another book. But Travis McGee would only be 2 weeks older, and right. and that's the important thing. So like Michael Connolly really blew it with Bosch, because every year he ages Bosch a year. So at this point, Bosch is around 80 years old. But see, I didn't make that mistake with Alex. So Alex is, next book, it's 3 weeks later, and same with Nana Mama. Yeah, she's old, but she's aging gracefully and very slowly. The cat, same thing. Cat is very slow. So cat is fine. Nana Mama's fine. Alex is still a young guy. So it's good.
No, that's great for readers to know how you plan the long-running series, because it's certainly different than planning for a standalone.
Yeah, well, you never know with the standalone. I thought originally that Two Sisters Detective Agency might be a standalone, but it's not. It's doing so well, and Hollywood, they're bidding for it, a couple of the studios, which is just kind of interesting.
Great.
So whatever I had planned, there's definitely going to be some more of those two sisters. It's kind of fun.
Excellent. Excellent. So in the first chapter of the memoir, you invite readers into your writing space. What does that look like?
It looks like what's behind me. You can't really see too much, though. Let me just see if we can.
Oh, exactly.
Go this way. Now we can
Yes.
see all those, the shelves, and it keeps going around and around and around. And Ned Rustin, the publisher, is trying to hide there, but we can see you. And but it goes all the way around, and on the shelves, that lower shelf there, I think right now there's 27 live projects, books and a novella or two, and a couple of screenplays. So I'm busy. I had a reporter come in here once, and I was pulling out actually the drawers because I was doing the novellas, the book shots. And as I'm pulling him out, he's going, "This is crazy. This is crazy." And then he looked at me, he said, "James, you are crazy." So yeah, so you're in the whatever, the den of whatever's going on here. That's what it is. I can see my bride back there in her wedding gown. It's nice. What a nice thing. That was a friend of mine blew up the bestseller list. I think that was my first bestseller somewhere in there.
Oh,
First number one, I think. Yeah.
excellent. So we have Natasha from Gallatin, Tennessee here in the audience tonight, and she has a question. Okay. She asks, if you have two story ideas that you think can be good books, how do you decide which one to do first?
It doesn't really matter. I mean, part of it will be when I have, if I know I'm probably going to write both of them, it doesn't matter which comes first. But the one I'll do first will be the one where I think I've figured out the story a little better. I mean, there's at least two of the things that happen when I'm considering a story. One is conceptually, is it something that I think I want to write about? And second, if I was a reader, I am a reader, would I want to read it myself? And then the second piece is, do I have a story? I mean, this is a cool, and you'll read a lot of books where you go, this is a pretty cool story. And then you get into it and you go like, well, they didn't really figure out how to keep the story going. There's a book coming out later this year, Blowback. And the concept, I knew the concept was terrific. And it's like those books that used to be in the paranoia in the 50s, like 7 Days in May. And but it's that kind of book. And I think we're in one of those periods now where we're a little paranoid about the government and how the world works, et cetera. And the concept here is, imagine if an American president went crazy in office. Who could think such a thing? And I'm not even going to fill in. You can fill in your own president, or you can put Putin in there, an American Putin. But it's an interesting, loaded concept. And I knew it was. I mean, I knew it had the potential to be a cool book. And then the issue is, okay, is the story going to be cool? Is it a good story? Is it one where you keep getting surprised and you don't know what's going to happen next? Because if the reader figures the story out 100 pages in, that's a big problem. Even if it's a red herring, but if they think they've figured it out and they're going like, oh, I don't really want to read the rest of it, that's no good. And it doesn't matter if, on page 350 they find out, oh, that was just a red herring. They probably won't even get to page 350 at any rate.
Well, it was exciting to see a pre-publication review from Kirkus saying that it's the perfect beach read for political junkies.
Yeah, well, you don't have to be everybody's a political junkie these days. Exactly. You can't help yourself. It's not even politics anymore. It's just it's our life. It's like, it's whatever. I don't remember seeing anything even close to what's going on in this era. And I remember I did a book with Lisa Marklund from Sweden. And, in Sweden, in America, you write a book, a novel or whatever, you're lucky if you get one interview. Over there, when we wrote that, we had 46 interviews with the press. And the one question they kept repeating was, how do the Swede and American ever get along and write a book together? And we got along great. And we said the secret was, one, that we believed in one another's talent. And the second thing is we listen, and people don't want to listen anymore for whatever reason. And that's always been one of my issues with Hollywood. A lot of them, they just don't want to listen. I remember for Along Came a Spider, they asked me, how do you pronounce Gary Siniji's name? And I said, Siniji. So, of course, in the movie, it's Sonji. So you're like, why did they ask? I don't, they don't listen.
So speaking of talent, a professor, when you were in graduate school at Vanderbilt, spotted you pretty early, and he said that you had what it takes. So what was that moment like?
Yeah, well, it was great because my biggest cheerleader was my grandmother, and she said you can do anything. You can, she said, except you're not going to play in the National Basketball Association. I like to play ball as a kid. She said, that's not happening, but you can do a lot of things. And she had that line, hungry dogs run faster, which is in the book. But when I was at Vanderbilt, one of the professors, there was a writing professor, and he said, you have the gift. And then don't waste it. And then I showed him my mystery, and he said, you lost the gift.
Oh.
So it was good. I mean, he was kidding a little bit, but he kind of was expecting me to write a little more, a lot of people, it's interesting in America, people don't necessarily take mysteries as seriously as maybe they should. In England, they do. I mean, in England, they go like, no, mysteries are serious literature. They can be, but here it's a little different.
Yes. So then you went on to Madison Avenue and Life as a Madman. What was that like for you?
Well, Mad Men, actually, the series, that was before my time, which is hard to imagine, but true. I mean, what I always say about advertising is I was in advertising, but I've been clean for 25 years now. So it's been a long time since I have had to do what I had to do back then. I think one of the good things about it is it makes you very aware that there's an audience, because you go in and you think, oh, I can do these commercials. And then they test one and you find out that literally nobody paid any attention to that commercial that you thought was so good. So that was helpful. And I think it's both a strength of mine and a weakness that I'm aware of an audience. And also that I'm aware, I have this notion about that I'm sitting across from somebody and I don't want them to get up till I've finished. And that, once again, is a strength and a weakness. It's a strength because I keep hooking people and holding, and I don't want to lose them. But it's also a weakness in terms of maybe not going as deep as I should sometimes, which Denise helps me with.
Oh,
go deeper, go deeper.
Well, speaking of that, one of the most wonderful parts of the book for me was the way you wrote so movingly about the two amazing love stories you had in your life.
Yeah, I was with Jane Blanchard early on, and for 7 years, actually. And at a certain point, she got a brain tumor, and they said she wouldn't have long to live. She wound up living with the brain tumor for over 2 years, which was a blessing. And as difficult it was in a lot of ways, it was also one of the most special times in my life. But the great thing about Jane, who was just a wonderful, wonderful person, was that I learned two things. A lot of people will go through life and they'll have a really bad relationship somewhere, or a bad marriage, and it really sours them on the potential for love and relationships. But the great thing about my time with Jane was, one, I really learned that I was capable of loving somebody very deeply, and I'm not big on sacrifices, but doing the stuff you need to do to just stay close to somebody, and just feeling so lucky that you're with them and you never want to lose them. And the second thing that I learned from the relationship was that I was lovable, that me, the real person, the person that you're going to spend your days with, could be a joy to be around. And that was two really important things to learn. And some people they aren't lucky enough to have that experience. And after Jane died, that's why I eventually said I have to try to find somebody to be with, because I believe in love, and I believe in romance, and I believe in marriage. I mean, it doesn't have to be marriage for some people. And I found Sue. And as I say in the book, I mean, one of the wonderful things about our relationship is we love each other. I mean, we're very close, and we've been together now for 26 years. But we go to bed every night holding hands. I was with Sue, Sue, she was on tour. She had to go to Florida for a day or two. But last night, as we always do, we went to sleep holding hands. And the funny line about Sue that I use occasionally is that, if Sue ever leaves me, I'm going with her. So, at any rate, but as you mentioned, it is, and those two love stories are part of the book. And I think the book really surprises people. They, I mean, if it was me and it was some writer, I go, why do I want to read some book about a writer? And I get that, but it will, and as I say, I mean, just the 5-star ratings, I'm shocked because I have not written a book, I don't think, that had such a high proportion of 5-star ratings, which I don't know, it's cool.
Very cool. Very cool. So another audience question, Jocelyn from Gibsonia, Pennsylvania is here with us tonight. And she says that
just down in Pennsylvania, we had a wonderful outside of Pittsburgh. We had a terrific group of people. Wonderful, but probably the best one of any of the tour events.
Oh, so great. Well, anyway, Jocelyn asks she says that Suzannes Diary for Nicholas is her favorite book. And she's wondering how you got the idea to write a book that was not a thriller.
Yeah, interesting. Initially, Little Brown didn't want me to write it. They said it wasn't my brand. And I said, I don't really want to get into brands. I don't think about writing that way. I don't think about marketing. I never took any marketing courses or anything like that. But I said, if there's a commonality in terms of the way people look at my books, it's that you can't put them down. And so that if I wrote a love story, and people decide whether they want to read love stories or not, but if they do, if I wrote it, you would know it's a love story that the pages kind of turn themselves, and it's that kind of story. The origin was my wife Sue, who you just talked about. She has about 5 million photographs of our son, and I was in the living room. This is a while back. And I was looking at one of these big, thick books on one of the tables in the living room. It has all these pictures of Jack. And it occurred to me that at a certain point, Sue and I are both older, that, Jack might be looking at these photographs and we wouldn't be around. And then I had this horrifying thought of looking at these photographs, Sue and I, and Jack not being around. And that was the stimulus for Suzannes Diary for Nicholas, which is a love story, but a love story with some real bite to it. And interestingly, even though Little Brown didn't want to publish it originally, it's one of my 3 or 4 best-selling books of all time. So I was really glad that they changed their mind after they read it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but you gave me that book for homework before.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's one of my favorites as well. So anyway, so you're famous for your fiction, but your memoir is one of many #1 New York Times bestselling nonfiction books you've written.
Somebody
recently.
asked actually twice it came up, who's my favorite character that I've written about? And I said, me. Which isn't true, but it was a fun experience to write it.
Definitely.
But I'm sorry, Denise, what was the question?
I was asking, so your memoir is one of many #1 nonfiction
books.
Recently. So what interests you about nonfiction? You've been doing
well, the first was the Jeffrey Epstein, and that was kind of an accident. One of my best friends in Florida, he had been, in the area and he covered the Epstein story back then. And a lot of people outside of Florida didn't know the story. And we were thinking about maybe doing a documentary movie. We had done one that had won a couple of Emmys. And when he told me the story, I said, no, I want to write a book on it because the book is insane. And so that hooked me a little bit. And then I did the football player, and actually we have one coming, which, as you know, Denise, is a really terrific book. Diana, William and Harry, and the idea there is, I mean, as we know, there are way too many books, or at least certainly enough books about Diana as princess. This is about her as a mother, and how hard that was, being in the spotlight the way she was. and how hard it was for the boys growing up and how hard it was for them growing up without their mom. So it's a very different kind of an approach to nonfiction, to that subject. And I wouldn't have done it if we hadn't, agreed that was what we were going to write about. The other series that if I've done anything important, it actually is in the nonfiction, and we did Walk in My Combat Boots. And Matt Eversman, who was the actual sergeant portrayed in Black Hawk Down, he's a good friend of mine in Florida, and I saw him doing interviews with combat people. And as most of us know, a lot of people, men and women who've been in combat, they don't want to talk about it. But Matt gets him talking about it. And I watching him, I had this idea, Walk in My Combat Boots. And our mission became, he would do the interviews, and then we would turn them into these 6 or 7 page nuggets, these little, where you get a sense for that person, and also 1 or 2 of their really terrific stories, amazing stories. But our mission was that if you had served, you would say Eversman and Patterson got it right, totally. And of course we did, because we're just taking the words of people who lived it. And then if you are one of these people that like to BS that you know things you don't know anything about, you would say, I had no idea. And now I'm beginning to understand what it's like to be in the military, what it's like to be in combat. So you really learn something, and it's very readable. And then we did ER nurses, and it's the same thing. Oh, I love nurses. Yeah, but most people have no idea what ER nurses do, no idea. And the fellow who did directed and wrote the Dope Sick, he didn't write the book, but Dope Sick, he wrote wrote and directed the series for Hulu. And he was going to do something on nurses, helicopter nurses in Appalachia. And I was talking to him, I said, well, you should read this book. And he read the book and he said, I'm not going to do the one about helicopter. I want to do this book. But he went to ABC and he said, I want to do this, but I won't sell it to you unless you read it, because you have no idea what nurses do. And this thing is going to be so different than anything on television. And they did read it. And now, and to his credit, not, because a lot of times in Hollywood, they go, oh, it'll be my next project. He's already finished the script, which is great. So that will be fascinating. And but I love that series. And we just finished Cops, which is going to come out early next year. And that's amazing too, in that you really get a sense for, most cops never fire their guns. Almost all of them, realize the need for reform. There are no cops that you ever talk to who go like, yeah, you shoot people in the back, and some of these, and also, but how hard the life is. I mean, people go, well, that's their job. Well, yeah, kind of, but I've ridden with cops 4 or 5 times now. And, I haven't had this experience, but it's 4 a.m. and half the people in that town have guns, and, it's a domestic disturbance, and you got to climb up 4 dark stories at 4 and 3 a.m. or whatever. This is not your normal job. And it's easy to see how sometimes mistakes can happen. It's just, your life is on the line too. Oh, it's their job to get killed. Not really. So and I think the book will get people to understand how complicated it is. And it's not making excuses for cops at all, because, most of them will go like, some of these things that happen, they're tragedies, and they know that. And then we're doing librarians and booksellers. That'll be the next one, which is kind of needed, because people don't really understand librarians and booksellers.
That's true. So
and we're interviewing a bunch of booksellers from Barnes and Noble too. Yeah.
That's right. Yes. So Glenn from Sugar.
And here's the interesting thing about the Barnes and Noble. Some of the indie booksellers, some of them sort of look, they go, well, Barnes and Noble. No, the Barnes and Noble booksellers are great. They are as passionate and devoted and work as hard. And their biggest thrill is when they can turn somebody onto a book. And especially kids, and they come back and go, oh, our kids love that book. And that's a thrill for indies, and it's a thrill for Barnes and Noble, and it's great.
Yes, absolutely. So Glenn from Sugar Hill, Georgia has a question.
Sure.
What is your favorite book you've written so far?
I don't, the answers would be, I love having created Alice Cross. I love having created the Women's Murder Club. In those series, I love Walking with Combat Boots and ER Nurses. A lot of the kids' books. I mean, my favorite actually of the kids' books is Potty Mouth and Stupid. And some, gatekeepers who are dangerous, they go, oh, that's stupid in the title. Yeah, because it's about word bullying. And these kids, when they're like 4 years old, they get these nicknames. And when they're 11, 12, they still have the nicknames. And I think in this age, that word bullying is even more dangerous than physical bullying. I mean, I think, well, it's certainly more prevalent. And it just beats the heck out of kids. And it's a terrible thing. And that's what that book is about. And it's very funny. So I love that book. I love the Black Book. I think that's and you never know. You hope all of them are going to turn out great. I was very pleased with James Patterson by James Patterson. You're sitting here. I don't know if it's going to work. And obviously, having people praise it the way, Bob Woodward said, I mean, unbelievable stuff. He said it was like I interviewed Patterson and he had taken the maximum dose of sodium pentothal, the truth serum. And he just told everything, which is pretty true. I didn't take sodium pentothal, but
So it's so hard to pick favorites, but people probably really wonder who is more fun to work with between President Clinton.
Neither one of them. They were both just awful. No, you know what? No, it was great. It was an honor. One of the things I'm actually on the other side of the computer here is the Hudson River. I grew up on the Hudson, up the river here, small town, Newburgh, New York. My father grew up in a Newburgh poorhouse, the Pogie. His mother was a charwoman there. The river's always been very important to me. But it is a blessing to me. I still look at the world the way a kid from Newburgh would. Newburgh was a town without a lot of money. And oh my God, I'm talking to people from Barnes and Noble today. This is so cool. Oh my God, I have a book on the bestseller list. I'm not blasé about it. It's an honor to work with President Clinton, to work with Dolly Parton, to work with the Einstein estate who approached me, to work with Muhammad Ali's estate who approached me to do Becoming Muhammad Ali that I did with Kwame Alexander. To work with Kwame was a great honor. So I love this stuff. And I think that the really special thing about working with President Clinton and Dolly is we just have become really good friends. And he gave me for I think it was for Christmas, Monopoly for Socialists. And then another president, he gave me a humidor, and he knows I don't smoke. So I called him up and I said, do I put bubble gum or chocolate cigars in the humidor? He said, oh, at our age, you got to bubble gum because you got to keep the teeth healthy and whatever. But that's a wonderful relationship. And I love the way those books turned out. And then with Dolly, I mean, it's just a spectacular. And she, I went down there I went to graduate school at Vanderbilt. I think you mentioned that earlier. So I know Nashville anyway. And Dolly and I spent a couple of hours in her office. And, she's from a small village and went to Nashville, was a 1,000,000 to 1 shot. So we have all that background stuff. And we agreed to do the book 2 hours in her office. And we just made the deal, just the two of us. No lawyers, no agents, no BS. And we totally have stuck to it. And that's going to be a movie. And Reese Witherspoon's company is going to produce it. And Sony is going to distribute it. And so it's just very exciting. And Dolly, for not this birthday, the last birthday, she sang happy birthday to me over the telephone. And I wanted to ask her if she would call again and I wouldn't pick up so I could, record it on voicemail, but I didn't have the guts. But this birthday, she sent me, I don't have it I have it in my other office. And she knew it was good. She sent me a poem, but she framed it because she knew it was a good poem. And it's called New Old Friends. And she had written a song with Kenny Rogers about new old friends. And she said that she believed at the time there were no such thing. She and Kenny both believed that. And she said she believed that till I walked in her door. And she said, she calls me JJ or Jimmy James. She said, Jimmy James, we're new old friends. I will always love you, Dolly. So that's spectacular. I mean, to have that relationship. And I think the book Run Rose Run really turned out nicely. We both really like it. And we're really hopeful about the movies, and we're very careful to pick Reese and her company, because everything they've done has been good. And that's what, that's the main thing for Dolly and I. We want to watch the movie and go, damn, we're glad we made that thing,
Exactly. So from working with Dolly Parton to going back to your own life, singing in the church choir, to attending Woodstock, music is really a running theme in
yeah.
memoir.
I worked at McLean Hospital, and James Taylor was a patient there. He wasn't famous yet. But we used to go to the coffee shop, and I'd sit 10 feet from James Taylor, and he had already written Fire and Rain and Sweet Baby James, and he would sing some of these songs in the coffee shop. And he had long hair, and he had a lot of hair back then. I had a lot of hair myself, but it was, it was spectacular. And I did go to Woodstock. Everybody my age says that they did, but I looked around and most of them weren't there, so they're full of it. But that was great. I mean, you're sitting there, listening to this. I mean, I will tell you, I think we were half a mile from the stage. It was insane. And then I was an usher at the Fillmore East, which was the big place that everybody, or one of the two, there was a Fillmore East and a Fillmore West. So I saw Hendrix, I saw the Doors, I saw Jefferson Airplane, I saw Grateful Dead, and it was spectacular. I lost my hearing, but it was a wonderful experience. So music has been big, and that was part of what drove me to do the book on John Lennon.
Right. Exactly. Oh, great. But so you were also a character on Castle.
I was in, I think, 3 of the Castles. And it was funny. Years later, I was on a plane from Florida, and I'm walking down the aisle, and this woman's pointing at me. She says, I know you. So I stop. Hi, how are you? She says, you played Patterson on Castle. And I said, yeah, I'm going to play him on the plane today too. So, and I'm going to play him on this thing that we're doing tonight. I'm going to play Patterson. Yeah.
Right. So when your audiobooks are released, typically professional actors record them, but this time around you decided to record the audiobook yourself. What was that like?
Horrifying. It's horrifying. It's like 15 hours. I was clawing on the glass cage they have you in, and I didn't want to do it anyway, but I did it. I've never heard it. You guys have never sent me the audio tape, so I've never heard it. People say it's pretty. I don't know. I'm not going to recommend it because I haven't heard it. So, but from what I heard, it's from what I've heard from other people, it's good and fun. And so if you want to, listen to it that, or experience it that way, that's another way. Yeah. Do we have more questions from people?
Yeah, we do. So we have a teacher in the audience tonight, and Jean from Glenview, Illinois.
Oh, I know Jean. Sure.
Yeah, you say in your book, let your children see you read, and Jean agrees with you, and she tells her students and family to read 1 hour every single day, and wants to know what you think of that advice.
I think that the most important thing is to make sure that in the schools, and I know Jean would agree with this, and the trick is that a lot of the boards of education don't get it. It's really important, especially when kids are really young, that they read a fair amount of stuff where they go, I loved it. I love that. Jimmy Books, that my kids imprint, our mission is when a kid finishes the Jimmy book, to say, please give me another book. And it should be the same thing in schools. You want to, if your objective to get kids reading, give them books that stimulate them to want to read more. We don't need to deal with Shakespeare in the 3rd grade. Eventually, yes, but not in the 3rd grade. We'll get there. Hopefully, but if they taught Ingmar Bergman, if they did movies in schools, and you could do that, but they started with Ingmar Bergman movies, we'll go, oh, I don't like movies. And that's what we do to kids. They have to learn a lot of rules, and then we get them reading stuff that doesn't turn them on. It's silly. It's like, no, if the objective is to get them reading, then do the smartest things to get them reading. And at a certain point, when they're competent readers, and if we don't get kids to be competent readers, you know, when I talk to big groups of librarians and teachers and whatever, I'm here to save lives, because we cost thousands of lives every year because we have not gotten a higher percentage of kids to be competent readers. Right now, it's like 43%. I'm not getting it. I work with the University of Florida. We have the vaccine. We can get it up into the low 80s. And you will save every year thousands of lives, because those kids, if they're competent readers, then they can get through high school. If it's appropriate, they can go to college. They have a much better chance of getting, there's certainly a wider choice of job options. But if they're not competent readers, how are they going to get through high school? And if they don't get through high school, you know, it's going to be, and you know, and prisons are full of kids. Well, not kids, but grown-ups now, who one of the issues was that they couldn't stay in high school.
Right.
That's one of the, that doesn't solve all the problems, but it's huge, and we can do something about it.
So Eric from Delaware asks, where does your creativity come from?
Oh, you know, everybody doesn't have it for whatever reason. It's a gift. It just, you know, and I grew up in the woods, you know, as I said, upstate, and I used to wander in the woods, you know, and there weren't a lot of kids around me at that point, and I would just tell stories to myself. That probably has something to do with it. And some of it is just, I think, genes, whatever. And then you just keep doing it and you get better at it. I mean, my imagination is big, to put it mildly. Yeah, and that is a gift.
So Madeline from Frisco, Texas wants to know, do you ever go back and reread your earlier books?
No, I don't. I'm too busy. I've read, occasionally I go back and read a chapter or so. But for the most part, no. I did I did try to reread at one point Season of Machete. It's horrifying. And Stephen King, he said I'm a terrible writer. That's crazy. But I did write Season of the Machete, and it is terrible. So in terms of that book, I will absolutely agree with Stephen. And you know, it's a funny thing with that. I look, my thing on Stephen King is I like a lot of his books, and that's pretty much the end of it for me. He's fine, and you know, whatever. But he's right about Season of Machete. That is a terrible book, and you guys should take it out of print. Hopefully, it's out of print. But if it's not, do me a favor, get rid of it. If it's in Barnes and Noble, flush it down the toilet.
So Sadie from Lacey, Washington wants
sales rep at Barnes and Noble just slit their wrist.
So she's really interested to know how you make your characters so realistic and relatable.
Well, thank you for the question. You certainly try, and even the villains. You want to make them as human. Obviously, a lot of them, there are, and you know, the other thing about it, in terms of the fiction, I do not write realism. And every once in a while, somebody say, this isn't very realistic. No, it isn't, you know, and neither is Picasso. And I'm not comparing myself to Picasso, but I don't write realism. It's larger than life. It's a little operatic. But even given that, you know, Alice Cross is relatable. Alice Cross is over the top. He solves more mysteries, more murders than anybody could ever solve in a lifetime. But that's the genre, and that's okay. But he is realistic in terms of his family, the way he relates to his family, I think. Michael Bennett with all those kids, and could that happen? Sure, it could happen. You know, somebody could wind up with 5 or 6 or 7. It's possible. But what both of those books series are about on some level is balancing work and home, which a lot of us do. Not everybody, but a lot of people have to balance that. You know, whether it's your husband or your partner, or whether it's a family or whatever, you have to balance or try to balance. And with the case of Alex or Michael Bennett, that's a huge balancing act because their work life is so intense and dramatic, and so it is larger than life. But that's okay. We get it. We get it.
Yeah. So April from Sacramento is wondering if you have any new series that she can watch for.
Well, the Two Sisters Detective Agency now, we're going to do more of those. We have we've got interesting stuff. One of the things that's interesting in writing the James Patterson by James Patterson, I got into the writing in the way I haven't in a while, and care of the sentences, and I think I got better because of writing that book. And there are a lot of books. Blowback I mentioned this year, which is coming, I think is particularly good. There's a Christmas book, the 12 blankety 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 days of Christmas, and I think that's a really nice gift Christmas. It's really funny and a cool book. And then next year, a lot of Mike Lupica, who I did The Horsewoman with. We have 2 books coming out next year, House of Wolves, which my wife Sue says is absolutely her favorite book that I've done. And if you like Succession and Yellowstone, you will love House of Wolves. So that, I don't know if it's going to be a series, but it's maybe, but it's a really good book. And then there's one which I will, for the moment, call Jane Smith. And that will be a series. And that's with Lupica again, and that's next year. And that's, once again, it just turned out great. Turned out great.
Great. Well, a lot to look forward to. So Terry from West.
I've really made Lupica a much better writer.
Great. So Terry from West Fargo, North Dakota wonders if writing has gotten easier for you or harder over the years.
Well, I think the hardest, I think when you're a struggling writer, it's really, really difficult. And I think we talked about winning an Edgar at some point. And I remember when I got up to make the speech, all I said was, I guess I'm a writer now. And what I meant by that is it sort of was the verification, one, that the book was published, and 2, that it won an Edgar. So I think that's the hardest time, when you're struggling. Maybe you've published a short story or 2 or whatever. So that's difficult. In terms of the actual process, the first draft is by far the hardest. And I'm a multi-draft person. So the follow-up drafts are not as hard to me. Outlines are not, but they're fun. I love outlines. But the first draft is painful.
So I want to make probably our last question about your grandfather. It's a wonderful moment in the book about you were out with him driving over Storm King Mountain, and
I'll tell my grandfather was just a prince among men, and he 6th grade education, a very bright guy. Started, just built from scratch. I mean, literally from scratch, built a building, small restaurant and bar that he owned, Fieldstone Lodge. And when I was a kid, 10, 11 years old, one day a week in the summer, he would let me go with him. And he delivered ice cream and frozen food in the Hudson Valley. And, we know it's not the greatest thing in the world to get up at 4 every morning and be packing the truck. And then by 5 o'clock or so, we'd be heading out. And we used to go over the Storm King Mountain in the direction of West Point. And he'd be singing at the top of his voice. He had a terrible voice, horrifying. He'd be singing, "Oh, Suzanne," and put another nickel in the Nickelodeon, all the 8 crazy old songs from that period. And he said to me, he said, "Jim, I don't care what you do when you grow up." He said, "I don't care if you become a doctor or the president." I don't think he knew how easy that might be, or whatever you want to say. I don't want to get political, and I won't. Or if you wind up driving a truck like I do. But he said, "You got to be singing when you go over the mountain to work in the morning." And I do. And I hope everybody listening and watching does.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I feel like that's a perfect closer for tonight. And so Thank you everyone for joining. Thanks.
Yeah. I hope everybody had a good time. And, as they say on the road, if you like James Patterson by James Patterson, please tell everybody you know. And if you don't like it, keep it to yourself.
Exactly. Well, we just want to remind everybody that if you did purchase a ticket that included a book, you'll receive your book with signed book plates in about 6 to 8 days. If you haven't purchased a copy for yourself or a gift, you can find James Patterson by James Patterson on barnesandnoble.com or at your local B&N store. And the links.
Way to sell, Denise.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Happy reading, everyone. Thank you so much.